Hi, I'm Marcia Marshall, and I'm going to talk today about my experience learning about Ann Eliza Howland Cook from her diaries, which we published recently. We published the writings that she did in the last 2 years of her life, from 1894 to 1896, and it was already transcribed and typed out, so we checked it against the original, and then we did some research to identify the people that she named and some of the words and things that she talked about, put those in footnotes to help it be more understandable. The published diary also has some photos and things at the back to help contextualize the diary. So I want to tell you a little about what I learned about Ann Eliza from her diaries. Ann Eliza Howland was born in New York in 1823, and she moved with her family to Kalamazoo County, Michigan, when she was a teenager. She met Phineas Walcott Cook when she was 15 years old, when Phineas was hired to work for her father. They were married in 1840 when she was 16 and he was 20. Phineas's memoirs recount a bit about their courtship. He said that he would walk the 3.5 miles to visit Ann Eliza on Sundays, spend the day with her, go to meeting with her in the evening. Church meetings were often in the evenings back then. And since it wasn't safe to walk her home through the bear and wolf infested woods, he would stay the night and leave her home the next morning. One Monday morning, his father scolded him for spending whole Sundays away from home. He chided him for wanting to get married so young. Phineas remembered that when he was homesteading alone with his father in Michigan before his mother arrived, his father had urged him to marry so someone could keep house for them. But now his dad had changed his tune. One Monday after returning from Ann Eliza's house, Phineas fell gravely ill. The doctor treated him with large doses of calomel, which I'm sure did him so much good, with its massive mercury content. His family and neighbors thought that he would die, but after a week and a half, he revived. Then he was taken with the ague, a sickness they called ague back then, for 9 months. Later, he had what he called the inflammatory rheumatism, which lasted 6 months or more. Sometime in there, while he was sick, he asked someone to go get Ann Eliza to come and see him. Ann Eliza felt funny about coming to the home of her boyfriend or betrothed. I don't know when quite this was that she was asked to come visit him. But so she sent her twin sister, Anne Maria, instead to see him. When Phineas heard Anne Maria's voice in his house, he said he felt much disappointment and dissatisfaction. He told her to go home. He wanted to see Ann Eliza. For it was her I wanted to see, he wrote. The next morning, Anne Maria left and Ann Eliza arrived. I'm sure she was greeted much more pleasantly. He wrote about their wedding. It was the first day of January, 1840, I was married. By this time, all had agreed to the match, and all went to the wedding and had a good time. He said our fathers and mothers were present. They stayed till 2 o'clock in the morning and ate and drank and made themselves merry. When they retired, they wished us all the happiness we desired. They were also married at the same time as her twin sister, Anne Maria. So it was a double wedding. He wrote, they wished us all the happiness we desired, but Darius, his brother, and his lady, who he intended at that time to marry, because Ann Eliza did not invite her until the day before the wedding, thought that she did not use them very well. So after we were married and the dainties, or food, were passed around, they left and went through the back way. As they passed, they being by themselves, they filled their pockets and handkerchiefs full and packed it off without asking any odds, so that when we came to hand round the second time, we had but little or none to hand round. They must have taken at least half or 3/4 of a bushel of the best loaves of pound cake and pies and other things which were prepared for a second passing. But it all passed off, and I suppose they thought we never missed it, for nothing was said about it. That's what he wrote about their wedding. When they were introduced to the church in Michigan, they spent some time investigating it and then were baptized in 1845. They had 2 children at the time, Charlotte Aurelia, born in 1841, who later died in winter quarters when she was 6. Daniel Webster, born in 1843, who was always a sickly child, Phineas said, and died just shy of his 2nd birthday. And Harriet, they had 3 children. Harriet, born in 1845. This Harriet shows up in Ann Eliza's Garden City diary that we published. Ann Eliza agreed to leave their families and make the long trek west to Nauvoo to join the other LDS church members. However, when they got there, they found the saints had left Nauvoo and moved on to winter quarters. So they continued on and joined the refugee community there, awaiting a move farther west. In winter quarters, she gave birth to another daughter, Eliza Hall, but she died less than a year later. Both Charlotte and Eliza are buried in the Winter Quarters Cemetery, which is currently adjacent to the Winter Quarters Temple and across from a Winter Quarters Visitor Center. Their names are on this plaque of children that are buried there in Winter Quarters. After arriving in Utah, Phineas's journal mentions the Ann Elizas and her children. The family lived in the Great Salt Lake City, lived in Manti, Salt Lake again, Payson, and in the settlement they founded in Goshen. They also moved to Camp Floyd and then Garden City on the shores of Bear Lake near the Utah-Idaho border. Amanda Polly and Catherine joined their family as wives of Phineas in 1853, though Catherine divorced Phineas 3 or 4 years later. Ann Eliza spent the rest of her life in Garden City, although her husband Phineas made one more move to Afton, Wyoming with his youngest wife, Johanna, whom he married in 1878, and their young family. Separating from Ann Eliza and his second wife, Amanda Polly, and their families, and the family of his son Joseph, Catherine's son, Catherine had passed away by this time that the family was in Garden City. Details of their experience of polygamy are addressed in Janet Porter's book, Phineas Walcott Cook, A Legacy of Faith. But Phineas had been hounded by and arrested by the polygamy police, and he decided the move to Wyoming would help him avoid further persecution for polygamy. Phineas mentions earlier in his memoirs asking his wife Ann Eliza to keep a daily diary for him, and we don't have this record that she kept, though I wonder if he used it to write his memoirs, which were written halfway through his adult life. After Ann Eliza's death, two of Ann Eliza's journals were given to Ann Eliza's grandson, Alonzo Laker, or A.L. Cook, and one of them made its way to the Church History Library. This one contains a near daily record of her last 2 years of life. We don't know what happened to the other journal, so if anyone knows, please do tell. We're very interested in it. This last journal of Ann Eliza's years from 1894 to 96 is bound in a lovely red journal and contains her lovely penmanship. A typed transcript was done by Roca Raymond, and we now have this published and available on Amazon. The text is enhanced with footnotes detailing the people, places, and some words she used that we may not be familiar with. It's also complete with some pictures, maps, and photos to help contextualize her years. We also updated spelling, punctuation, capitalization, and formatting of her entries to help with readability. I want to tell you about the Ann Eliza that I found in this diary. She was close to her 71st birthday when the diary opens on the 1st of May, 1894. Her last entry is made on May 9th, 1896, and she died 9 days after that last entry. A final entry in the book is recorded by her daughter-in-law, Annie Vaderloss Cook. Ann Eliza is living with Annie and her son, Hiram, Ann Eliza's son, Hiram, who was married to Annie during this time. Hiram was her youngest son, her 16th child. He was 27 years old, and Annie was 24. Hiram and Annie had 4 children by this time, but 2 had died young. Their children living were Hiram Jr., or Jaime, as she calls him in the diary, who was 5 years old, and Lillian, or the baby, who was 1. The baby is introduced to us on page 2 of the diary. She says, Annie left the baby with me as she was asleep in her cradle. She's a very good child. A week later, the baby got tipped out of her little wagon on her head, but was not badly hurt. She cried pretty hard, but we hope she is not hurt. Lillian was often sick. Ann Eliza records, the baby is very worrisome, and the baby is poorly today, and Annie does not feel much better, nor the baby. And Ann Eliza cares for her, stays up with her, and worries about her condition. As I was working on the diary, I got to worrying about her too, as page after page the baby was sick, got better, then sick again. After a few days of fretting over her while I was working on this, worrying what was around the corner as I turned each page, I finally realized I could put my fears to rest. I pulled up Family Search and looked for Lillian Eliza Cook. I found that she lived past childhood, so yay, I could rest comfortably. She lived until 1946, married in 1911, and had a daughter named Edna. So happy for baby Lillian. Back to Ann Eliza. In 1894, she was living with Hiram, Annie, Jaime, and baby Lillian in Garden City, Utah. 6 of her 16 children were alive and lived in communities right around her, except her daughter Phoebe Alred, who lived with her family in Mexico. She exchanged letters with Phoebe frequently in the diary. Harriet, her oldest, had moved back to Garden City with her children to live near her mother when she was widowed. She was the postmistress of the Garden City post office at the time of the diary, which was sometimes located in Harriet's house. Ann Eliza's sons, Alonzo, Henry, and William, lived nearby her in Swan Creek, Woodruff, and Garden City with their families and interacted with her frequently. Phineas's second wife, Amanda Polly, who was close to Ann Eliza, lived nearby and also spent a great deal of time with her daughter, Mary Roselia, who lived in Hams Fork, Wyoming. Amanda was a nurse and a midwife and is detailed often in the diary, taking care of people in the community. As a side note, Amanda Polly also helped deliver a baby in the basement of the Salt Lake Temple during its dedication when a visiting expectant mother went into labor during the meeting. There are newspaper articles about it at the time. Amanda Polly's other living child, David Cook, ran a local store, and Ann Eliza frequently mentions her line of credit with him. Many of the Cook grandchildren get mentioned in the diary. Interestingly, as of now, all of Ann Eliza's grandchildren are, of course, dead, but the last one died as recently as 1988. Maybe that only seems recent to me. One thing I really loved about this diary is that Ann Eliza was surrounded by the whole cast of her living family and Phineas's family members at the end of her life. All are mentioned in this 2-year diary. Joseph Walcott Cook, the son of Phineas's third wife, Catherine, had a large and prosperous ranch in Border, Idaho, and made frequent visits, and the other Cook children visited his ranch. Ann Eliza mentions a visit from Joseph Meservey, who had been married to her daughter, Augustia Prescindia, until Augusta died. And she mentions seeing Joseph during the diary. Ann Eliza is low on emotions or emotional detail in her journal, but I noticed a couple of trends that may have been her way of showing emotion in this very uptight Victorian era. At a few times in her journal, she goes into a great deal of particular detail about names, dates, and places, and I think that may have been her way of dwelling on a particularly emotional detail. For instance, when telling of Joseph Meservey's visit, she says, Joseph Meservey, my son-in-law from Wilfred Snake River, came for a short visit and business combined. He married my daughter, Augusta Prescindia, who was born at Winter Quarters, Omaha Nation, which is now called Florence, Nebraska, March 9, 1848. She died in St. Charles, Idaho, September 23, 1867, in childbirth, leaving a daughter named Ann Augusta, who was born at Fish Haven, March 9, 1866, and who died in Garden City of the measles, January 23, 1883. His wife and daughter both being buried at St. Charles, Idaho, he is calculating to go and see what condition their graves are in, and if need be, to repair the fence for the present, until he can bring gravestones or other things that seem necessary. We were all glad to see him. There's a lot of detail there, great genealogical detail, and I think maybe a clue to Ann Eliza's emotions about the death of her daughter, both of her daughter's children, and Joseph being the only thread of connection to them. And we have a picture of these graves at the back of our book of Ann Eliza's diary. Ann Eliza also corresponds often with a Jeannie Ledyard, who lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan. She sends pictures of herself and her children to Jeannie and receives pictures and gifts of money from Jeannie. Ann Eliza had left her parents and siblings behind in Michigan when she and Phineas moved west. We know that her parents eventually moved to California, and at one point Ann Eliza and Phineas visit them there. Her siblings stayed in Michigan, and many died before her. She had a twin sister named Anne Maria Heath, who died quite young. One of Anne Maria's children was Jeannie Ledyard. this niece who Ann Eliza corresponds with in this diary. She has other nieces and nephews who are alive at this time, but this is the only one she seems to keep in touch with. And following her penchant for details with meaningful people, she records, received a letter from Jeannie Ledyard of Grand Rapids, Michigan, congratulating me on my birthday. I am 72 today. She is the daughter of my sister, Anne Maria Heath, married Washington Heath of Grand Rapids, Michigan. My guess is this twin sister meant a great deal to Ann Eliza, and Jeannie was the remaining thread of connection to her. Ann Eliza wrote a few other entries in great detail. One of them was her wedding anniversary. She actually mentions her anniversary twice in this diary, once in 1895 when she wrote, I was invited to my daughter Harriet's to dinner, it being the 55th anniversary of my marriage, and the 15th of my granddaughter B, or Ann Eliza Beatrice, who was at her mother's on visit this winter. Marion Owens came over to help me. I walked by taking his arm and had a cane. Got along well, had dinner and a good visit, and just night my grandson Alonzo Randolph Teeples helping me home. The next year's anniversary, she actually mentions her husband, Phineas. He was living 75 miles away in Afton, Wyoming, with his youngest wife, Johanna, and their young children, and where they had gone to avoid the polygamy police after they had previously forced Phineas to spend 6 months in jail for cohabitation. This mention of her anniversary in the diary is the only time she mentions Phineas by name in the diary. Other times she does refer to him, but calls him Mr. Cook, or the children's father. Now, I don't think this is necessarily indicative of an estrangement of emotions or affection for him. I've noticed other 19th century writings in other diaries, spouses will call each other Mr. and Mrs. For instance, Wilfred Woodruff calls his beloved Phoebe Mrs. Woodruff throughout his diary. But this one time, Ann Eliza does name him. January 4th, 1896, her last wedding anniversary, just months before she would die, is noted with unusual detail and reminiscence. She says, I was alone all day. It is 56 years tonight, January 1st, 1840, since we were married, my twin sister and I. I was married to Phineas W. Cook of Richland, Kalamazoo County, Michigan. We were married at our father's house in Ross, Kalamazoo, Michigan. My twin sister, Anne Maria, was married at the same time to Washington Heath of Detroit, Michigan. She soon went to Detroit to live with him. We, my husband and I, went to live at Father Cook's. He, P.W. Cook, being the youngest son, they calculated to have us take care of them. Now, how about the other unemotional topics that Ann Eliza covers in her diary? Most of her entries are very matter-of-fact. We get a lot of running accounts of the weather in Garden City each day. We get some expenses and money talk, and we get a lot of laundry. Her daughter-in-law, Annie, is always doing laundry. It must have been never-ending. If she's sick for a couple of days, she mentions that Annie brings in a hired girl to help with the laundry. 25-year-old Annie must have worked her fingers to the bone. As I was copy editing the final draft of this book with my daughter, Allison, we were working on it together. I would read the handwritten diary and she would check it against the typed manuscript. One weekend, Allison was busy, so I had my boys at home take her place and check some of the copy I was reading. When Allison returned, she said, "Oh no, I missed some. You did some without me. I didn't want to miss anything in the diary." I told her, "Well, I can catch you up pretty easily. Annie did laundry, then Annie did more laundry, and there you're caught up." Annie did a lot of laundry. Ann Eliza never mentions eating meals or what they had to eat for meals. I found that interesting. She mentions Annie baking bread, getting milk from the cows, Hiram working in the garden, growing wheat and oats, selling potatoes, worrying the frost will kill the fruit, and twice she comments that they all have plenty to eat. But she never discusses eating itself or what she had for dinner. She mentions berries a dozen times, picking, stemming, preserving, raspberries, currants, and gooseberries. I understand Garden City is quite famous for its raspberries. But food is always mentioned in connection with work, never pleasure. And there's a lot of work going on in this community, as described in her diary. Lots of women's work, she notes. Babies being born, people getting sick, people dying. Ann Eliza recounts a sad episode in the life of her son, William, who suffered, it appears, from mental health condition through much of his adult life. In September of 1894, she mentions, Will is not well, but has a lot of work to do, and Hiram is helping him with it. 2 days later, she says, I was at Will's this morning. His health is no better. He asked me if I would go to the temple with him. I told him I would if I could get ready, which I shall try to do. This would have been a trip to the Logan Temple, a day or two's journey away. She mentions him again on November 6, 1894. William cook very poorly again. I have been there part of the day, and I feel very bad about him. They are talking of going to Walcott's ranch, thinking it may do him good. A few days later, Will's family came home from Walcott's ranch. Sadie, Will's wife, had to see two things as Will had to stay a while, for they took him to Dr. Hoover, and he prescribed for him and told Will to keep him there a few weeks and see that he takes his medicines that he prescribed. Perhaps it might help him. Sadly, 19th century medicines rarely helped much of anything, let alone mental conditions. The next year in August, Ann Eliza mentions Will is much worse, and Alonzo and Amy, Alonzo's wife, came up yesterday, and Alonzo went in the field with him to help him shock up his grain to see if his mind would be better. I think working so hard in the hot sun has seemed to affect his head almost to derangement. He has gone to stay at Alonzo's, hoping it may be such a change that he would be better. And again, he has been quite bad for a while, and Alonzo has had him down there some time because he is not quite in his right mind and was troubled about trying to get some money out of the store, and he has a share in it. He thinks he has a right. The next month, she would comment that he's doing better. Then in October, Will is not as well in his mind, but is working as well as he can. He has a notion the Lord has appointed him to be bishop here. And Will was very contrary. David is away, and Alonzo, and we do not know what to do about him. We want him to be taken care of and treated by a good physician that understands his case, for he is getting worse all the time. Then on October 31st, she writes, Will came here this morning about 3:30 a.m. to write letters to President Woodruff about temple work and wanted me to go to the temple to stay all winter with him to work for the dead if he could get me a free pass. Went home about 5 o'clock and came about 7 again to write. Wrote several letters and went back to breakfast as he said I could not persuade him to stay here to eat. And went off about 9 a.m. He got on his horseback bareback in shirt sleeves, an old ragged backed vest, an old straw hat, and looked very bad. She recounts that he took off, and they asked around the neighboring communities to see which way he had gone, north to Swan Creek or south toward Meadowville. They found a mail carrier who told them that he saw Will beyond Meadowville, going south as hard as he could on his horse. We feel very bad, she wrote, about his going off, looking so bad without a coat or anything to eat and bareback. The next day they sent off a rescue party in David's carriage with bedding and Will's coat and some provisions for him. They waited and worried through the next day, asking every traveler if they had seen Will. That night it snowed 2 to 3 inches. The next day, she wrote, 3 p.m., Will rode up, his horse nearly ready to fall. Came the way he went, without a coat, had not seen either of the boys, had come from Huntsville that day, about 75 miles. Says he has been to Salt Lake and has seen President Woodruff, but would not say what he said to him. He feels bad about the boys going after him, says he wishes we would mind our business, for he could take care of himself. He sent his boy after horses to go to Star Valley, Wyoming, but it is nearly night. We are not letting him go. He will have to be watched all the time. We think he will have to go to be treated. There are watchers with him all the time. Alonzo kept Will close with him after that for a few weeks. Then he went to Salt Lake and worked in the temple for a while, and on December 2nd, they checked him into the Provo Asylum with some letters of recommendation from his doctors. He wrote home they didn't think he would need to be in there long. He was still there when his mother, Ann Eliza, passed away on May 17th. I don't know the rest of this episode, but I do understand excuse me, that he was in and out of the mental institution for much of his life. Mental illness was a very, very heavy burden to be borne in the 19th century and still today, with little to ease the suffering, especially back then. Ann Eliza's diary does mention some community entertainment that takes place. There were picnics, dances, theater plays, Sunday school plays, school recitals, even a visiting entertainer who could play 10 instruments at once. She mentions household duties like papering walls, making clothing, going to the dentist to get teeth pulled or a new set of teeth made. She mentions current events like the Commonwealth Army's strike for higher pay for workers in the U.S., the Chinese-Japanese War, earthquakes around the world, and Utah's admittance as a state. She mentions this several times in the diary. On July 17th, 1895, she wrote that President Cleveland signed a bill for admitting Utah in the Union as a state. A few days earlier, she says, now after 46 years of residence in the Vales, we are admitted into the Union as a state. As President Cleveland signed the bill about midnight on the 17th, and our delegate, Rollins, has the point of the golden pen used on that occasion. The next week, on the 24th of July, she wrote, this day, 47 years ago, the pioneers entered the Vales of Utah, then a dreary desert inhabited by wild Indians and nothing but sagebrush. And you'll remember that she and Phineas entered that valley a year later. But the Lord has been with us as a people, and they have made the desert to blossom as the rose, and now we are a state. On August 1st, there were celebrations for this statehood move. She noted, celebrating Utah's statehood by firing of guns and raising of flags. A year and a half later, when Utah finally had a state constitution signed, sealed, and delivered, on Monday, January 6, 1896, she cheered, today we are celebrating Utah Day. The President, Grover Cleveland, signed the document making of Utah a state on Saturday, the 4th of January, 1896. We have been in the valleys 48 years before we were admitted into the Union. The pioneers arrived in Salt Lake Valley July 24th, 1847, and made all the roads and built all the bridges and founded a desert except sagebrush, and the whole country filled with wild Indians. Following the pioneers were a company of several hundred wagons with families who wintered here the following winter. That would have included her and Phineas. We had quite a celebration here for a small place, but I could not get out, cannot walk. But Annie went in the sleigh with her father's folks. Ann Eliza loved the Relief Society program. She had been president of her ward Relief Society in Garden City since 1879, serving 15 years until her death. Amanda Polly was one of her counselors, and a woman named Helen Moore was another counselor. They held Relief Society meetings at the meeting house on Thursday afternoons at 2 p.m. It seems from her diary they weren't planned for every Thursday, but maybe the Thursdays that they held their fast meetings at 10 a.m. Then they would hold Relief Society at 2 p.m. And those seemed to be about every 2 weeks, except when the weather was bad. Someone would ring the bell at the meeting house, and it must have been loud enough to hear from far away. The very bell, by the way, is on display at the Garden City's existing chapel. The plaque under the bell reads, about 1896, that's the last year of Ann Eliza's diary, this bell hung in a belfry on top of a little white church that stood on this very spot. It was rung 30 minutes before church and for fires and disasters. In 1926, the bell was broken during remodeling and put under the steps. The bell was found in 1977 when the church was torn down and restored in 1996. And there's a picture of this bell at the back of the book. Ann Eliza writes that one Thursday the bell rang for fast meeting, but there were so few that came that they did not have a meeting. Then the Relief Society was to have a meeting at 2 p.m., but she says, waited for the bell to ring, but it did not ring. So I went to ring it, but someone in the morning disabled it and I could not ring it. Therefore, we did not have any meeting as the sisters did not come because the bell did not ring. They seemed quite dependent on that bell. In 1896, the Relief Society church-wide encouraged stakes and wards to hold a birthday celebration for the General Relief Society President Zina D. H. Young, and especially to hold a dinner to benefit the poor in their communities. This kind of birthday celebration for leaders was done frequently in pioneer times. Sometimes other pioneer diaries noted that pioneer women would meet to celebrate someone's birthday and do a temple session in their honor and do the birthday person's family in the temple that day. Anyway, Ann Eliza and her Relief Society presidency set about planning this birthday celebration. And drama ensued. That must have been a pioneer time thing because our Relief Societies never have any drama in them at all, of course. It seems that her counselor, Sister Moore, did not want all the ladies to be invited. She had certain ones in mind that she wished to be excluded. Ann Eliza doesn't write which ones or why. I really wish she had. I'm just curious, but it made enough stir that the bishop got involved. He agreed with Ann Eliza that all the married ladies should be invited or the party not done at all. They had already planned not to invite the single ladies, which I don't really understand why, but I'm assuming that means the young women, since most were married by their 20s and there didn't seem to be single older women. So maybe they were just talking about not inviting the teenage girls. They cited dinner serving space as the reason to not invite the non-marrieds. Also, perhaps they meant to invite all, whether they were members of the Relief Society or not, because not all church members, ladies, would have joined the Relief Society back then. She doesn't spell all these things out. It probably went without being said back to her. But apparently Counselor Moore had gone ahead and passed on the word that some weren't welcome. Ann Eliza wrote that she hoped all would be smoothed over when the official invitations went out inviting everyone. Everyone married, that is. They planned the birthday celebration for January 31st, 1896, and in that day's entry, Ann Eliza wrote out how the entire party went in great detail. This was her last Relief Society event, and she passed away 3 months after it. From the detail and the page space that she gives it, it seemed to mean a great deal to her. She writes, Bishop Calder's prayer in behalf of the Relief Societies opened the event. Brother Vaderlas took them down with his team. I do not feel very well, but went to meeting at 10 a.m. Brother Vaderlas took us with his team and brought us back to get dinner and get our picnic ready for our dinner at the meeting house. Our forenoon was occupied. Meeting called to order by President Ann E. Cook. Singing by the choir, prayer by John Allen, singing O My Father, Thou That Dwellest by choir and congregation. Opening address by President Ann E. Cook, and a sketch of Sister Zina's life and labors and incidents of her recollections of her acquaintance with her for several years. Amy's original poem on Zina, song by Sister Saxton and daughters, reading in Eliza R. Snow's poems by Sarah E. Cook. Sarah T. Cook sang Just a Little Sunshine, Just a Little Rain. Rosalia W. McCann, original poem on Zina. Annie V. Cook, song on Secret Prayer. An essay by Mary Hall, recitation Daughters of Zion by Bertie Calder. Select reading by Miranda Linford, prayer by Conrad Vaderlas. We had an excellent time. I enjoyed myself very much. Sarah E. Cook was here to dinner, went back in the afternoon and had supper at 4. I got all cleared up about dark, and the brethren came after doing their chores and enjoyed themselves in different kinds of exercises. Program well rendered. Singing, recitations, games, singing. Sister Saxton danced, and her 2 daughters assisted in the chorus. Bishop Calder was there, also his counselor, Alonzo Cook. We had a real good time, but stayed too late waiting for them to hitch up, and I came very near fainting away before Alonzo could get the end gate out, but got home all right, but I felt quite sick. It seemed the evening quite wiped her out, but she stayed to the bitter end. Now I want to end with snippets of testimony that Ann Eliza gives us in this short diary. Near the beginning of her diary, her son Hiram, whom she lived with, was called on a mission. She records on October 19, 1894, Hiram got a notification this afternoon that he was called by President Woodruff to fill a mission in the Australasian Islands on a mission. This is Australia and New Zealand, what they called it back then. She doesn't say if this call was a surprise or whether they were expecting it. But a month earlier, she had recorded instructions given by some visiting church authorities. Brother Hiram Grant from Bountiful especially urged the young to inform themselves concerning the gospel and be enabled to explain it and prepare themselves to go on missions if called. We think of the young as teenagers, but in her time it could have meant any 20, 30, even 40-something, like 28-year-old Hiram Cook, married with 2 children. The next day, Ann Eliza writes, we are talking about Hiram's intended mission, where and how to get his outfit, as the missionaries have to pay their way out and fit themselves out. And now her testimony shines through. But we are confident the Lord will open the way for his laborers in the vineyard. There are many needed, as there are millions who have never heard the sound of the everlasting gospel, and it has to be preached in all the world before the end shall come. And we know by the signs spoken of by all the holy prophets, it is not far off, and it is necessary to do all we can to prepare for it. Her diary is then replete with details of preparations to send Hiram on this mission, and it is not without sacrifice. A month later, she records, sent a letter to City Box B to answer George Reynolds of yesterday. Box B in Salt Lake City was the post office box for the church. If one got a letter from Box B, it could have been a mission call or another church correspondence. Hiram was writing back to Box B to ask details about what his mission outfitting would cost. And we have a copy of this very letter that he wrote at the back of the book, the actual letter, as well as a copy of his acceptance letter that he sent to President Woodruff. A few days later, Ann Eliza reports, Hiram received a letter today from Post Office Box B, Salt Lake City, written by W.C. Spence, 183 immigration agent for the church, telling him what his fare would be from Salt Lake City to Sydney, Australia, or Auckland, New Zealand. $118.25, and she writes out in words, $118.25. It is going to be very hard to get. He can only raise $50 and what his clothing costs. Hiram experienced physical challenges prior to his mission. 6 months earlier, he had been trampled by a horse and his collarbone and ribs broken, which caused him pain and trouble for quite some time. Now, as he prepares to go on his mission, his horse stumbled and fell on him, dislocating his thumb. Even through these trials, Ann Eliza's testimony shines through. Was a miracle that he escaped with so little injury. He is trying to get ready to go on his mission, and the adversary, it seems, is trying to do everything possible to hinder the work of the Lord, and we feel to thank him for many mercies. November 28th, 1894, the time is fast approaching when Hiram has to leave, and oh, the loneliness. But he is called by the priesthood of the Lord to go and preach glad tidings of great joy to the South Sea Islanders, and we hope he may be blessed in this work. November 30th, all hands preparing to go to the farewell party. The baby in the afternoon was so much better we concluded to take her to the dance, as Annie and Hiram both wished to be together for the last time for 3 years. We all went, but the baby was very worrisome the first of the evening, but was very good the last part of the night. It is a free dance. We had an old-fashioned one. The boys donated Hiram about $20 to help him on his journey. All seemed to feel well towards Hiram and would be glad to help him more, if possible. December 5th, Hiram came with the mail about 3 o'clock. He borrowed $45. It would have been $100, but 5 is the interest. We have to keep the mail horses 5 months to pay for it. He got $50 for keeping them since July 1st to November 1st, so he has $100 of his own to start with. By being very saving, perhaps he may get along, but cannot get an overcoat. He so much needs also another satchel. He improvised a box, which he will use, but it is not safe for fear of being mashed to pieces. That gives us some idea of their poverty and also their thrift and industry and their faith. He finally leaves on December 7th, not 2 months since he received his call. Hiram started about 9 a.m. We feel as brave as possible, knowing it is for the gospel's sake and the will of the Lord. He is in the hands of our Heavenly Father, and he has gone to do his will. On February 18th, she records, received 2 letters from Hiram at Sydney, South Wales. He arrived there on the 8th of January, all well and had a prosperous journey, lacking 8 days of 1 month. When Hiram arrived at Sydney, there 2 elders at the wharf met him. They read the account of the news that Emil Vaderlas had put in that started from Vancouver on the Australian steamer Warramoo on the 16th of December. So they went to meet them when that steamer came into port. The elders' names are Brother Ridges and Armstrong. Thanks to her including these names, we were able to identify who these 2 elders were and have noted them in the footnotes of the book. The next day, she records, we received another letter from Auckland, New Zealand. That shows what kind of mail lag there was across the ocean. Expects to get his appointment as soon as the president comes. He was 5 days going on a steamer from Sydney, New South Wales to New Zealand. Had a pleasant voyage, was not seasick. They slept on the deck of the steamer. He arrived about midnight. 2 brethren met them, brothers T.S. Browning and John Johnson. Again, thanks to her naming these missionaries, we not only identified them, but found a missionary journal that Elder John Johnson kept that's now in the Church History Library, in which he mentioned meeting Elder Cook at the docks of New Zealand, or actually missing them. The elder's ship was late, and Elder Johnson went to meet it, and it hadn't come yet. So Elder Johnson and Browning left, and Elder Cook and his companion arrived in the middle of the night, and found nobody there waiting for them. Elder Johnson and Browning went down to the wharf in the morning and found the elders had arrived, but then left. Frustrated, Elder Johnson and Browning went to someone's house, found the Elder Cook's group had been there, and left. They finally found the elders and had a good time together until Elder Cook left for his permanent assignment in Canvastown, Marlborough, New Zealand. And there are pictures of these journal entries from Elder Johnson's journals, too, at the back of the book. And his journal is in the church history library. Ann Eliza continued to send letters to Hiram, pictures of the children, money, LDS-oriented magazines, and celluloid cuffs. He sent letters and little handmade gifts from some Maori women that he taught. She wrote, "Hiram is enjoying his labors in the gospel. We're so very glad to get his letters from him, and may the Lord bless him all the day long and open his way before him, so he may be prospered all the day long." The last 2 months of her life, the Relief Society met at her house on Thursday mornings. I love this detail, as she never mentions meeting any other place but the meeting house with the bell. I like to think that her Relief Society sisters realized her end was near, and to show their love and respect to their president of 15 years, gathered at her home. Her next to last entry reads, "Relief Society meeting here this afternoon, 15 present. We had a good meeting. Sister Allen, our secretary, read an excellent sermon delivered by Brother Franklin D. Richards, and all the sisters bore their testimony to the testimony goodness of God unto us. And I am feeling very poorly, but thankful to be able to set up during meeting and enjoy it." The church, the gospel, and her family were obviously very important to Ann Eliza, even if she wasn't a gushy, effusive writer. We can tell from the care she took to record these things how much they meant to her. At the end of her life, they were what she had and what she lived for. Her family members, some near and some far. Her ward members, especially her dear Relief Society sisters and friends. The gospel principles she embraced when she was young, she lived, held on to, relocated for, and sacrificed so much so that they could be preached near and far. I'm so thankful for Ann Eliza and her lovely little diary, so I can get a peek into a few of her 19th century days. I hope you will enjoy this book too, for its history and the life and memories of our Ann Eliza Howland Cook. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.